Okay. This lesson is on the gate. I am the gate, and I don't know which way that is, and I am the shepherd.
Well, they were opposite.
And they're both, and of course. But when I first I told y'all I'm the gate. And so we have to start thinking like that. And then when I open the book, she puts them together and beautifully, she puts them together and she gives us tons of information, which I hope I can share with you, plus with what we're saying. But the thing about this lesson is, I don't have a lot of mental thought on sheep. You know, like I've lived in Lubbock. I've never had a sheep. I've touched a sheep at a petting zoo. You know, you see them as you're driving to the hill country. Maybe those are goats. I don't know. I've seen pictures in Bible class. You know, Jesus holds the sheep.
We raise sheep on
the
the
shepherd.
ranch. We raise sheep and goats.
Well, so you may be our resident girl.
Well, I know about sheep.
Sheep. Well, so that is good. There are some things about sheep that we need to get out of the way.
Yes.
So what do you know about sheep?
They're
Temperamentally,
They're dumb. They're not smart. The goats are smart. And they can go
really? I
where
didn't
they
know
want to and do what they want to, but sheep are just, they need to be led. And they're just not very smart. They weren't ones we
Well,
had.
no, I believe that runs true to all sheep.
Yeah.
Well, so sheep are the most mentioned animal in the Bible, over 300 times.
Wow.
So it's to our credit to know a little bit more about sheep because the
They
people.
relate really well to humans.
Yeah, oh, do they?
I mean, I think we're kind of dumb.
Oh, well. Oh, I mean, those other people, yes, they are. Not us, but no, you're right. They are, and these are some of the words that you said, but also from our author. They're defenseless. They're pretty much helpless.
Yes.
They are prone to wonder.
Yes.
And that made me think of the song, you know, prone to wonder. We do, Lord, I feel it. They have poor eyesight. They follow without thinking the other sheep, and they're stubborn. And so all of that encompasses in with dumb because it's not like they're thinking their way through it. They're not cunning. You know, if you think of wolves and foxes or some of the other animals, they're thinking about it and they're making a plan, not a sheep. And so a lot of just keeping that in mind when the sheep are lost, because there's a lot of parable, or there's at least the great parable of the lost sheep. He's not lost because he went, I think I'm going to leave the herd and I'm going to, you know, go start my life. They just meander and they just, or I'm assuming, but they just, without thinking, pretty soon they've gone to a different patch and now they don't know what to do and they don't have enough sense to come back on their own. So they do need a shepherd, right? So in essence, if we're compared to sheep, which we are throughout the Bible, it's not the smartest or the best comparison. It's a little dumb thing in need of help. And I'm like, that hurt my pride, but okay. So thinking of the sheep, then you obviously come to the thought of shepherd. And a shepherd's role, again, I don't know a shepherd. Now I might know Helen, but the way we shepherd sheep, as pointed out by the author in the U.S. or whatever, is so different than the concept the Jews would have had of sheep. Because what do y'all have a thought with the shepherd in the United States if you've seen it or done it?
My dad did it when he was a teenager one year to earn money in the summer. And he was so disgusted with how dumb the sheep were. He refused, even though he was a farmer his whole life, he refused to ever have a sheep. It was like they are just too dumb to even deal with.
We inherited ours on the ranch. They were there when we bought the ranch. They were already there, but we didn't keep them very long.
Well, it's like too work intensive. Well, so if you think about the sheepdog, right?
That's what I thought of, but
Yeah.
more animals. And
Yes.
llamas, don't they kind of protect sheep or?
They're in the
Yes.
oftentimes.
Yes,
Mhm.
they can.
So like because we're Americans, I guess we don't want to, or it's just so many, or the ranch is so big, we don't say usually to a man, you go with your little staff like Jesus did and go hang out with the sheep. It's more like we send the sheepdog to nip and, bite around. And so her point in the book was a sheepdog's role is to cause panic with the sheep, like, oh no, I'm scared, or to, maybe even nip, like they're not hurting them, but it's kind of pain and panic is how we herd sheep.
Kind of drive them or herd them.
Yes. And it's not like, oh, baby, I love you. But in the Bible, it was more that Jesus was portraying the shepherds in those days really loved their
yes.
sheep.
And they were close
And
to
really
them.
like, almost like puppies kind of thing. And so when Jesus said this shepherd had 99, but he left them to go find the lost one sheep, the author even said, if I do anything with 99% accuracy, I'm proud. I wouldn't go after the one, probably, I had 99, why? But the way Jesus portrays the shepherd is utter love, utter care. It's worth it, to go after that one sheep. And so that I thought, oh, that's very different, than a sheepdog. A shepherd is obviously different, but she had the idea too that like your herd was maybe not so big, but all the herds would go into, we need to talk about the sheep gate. And that's one of ours is the gate. I think of a pen, like I think of cattle pens in Lubbock, with the metal and the chutes or either big pastures and maybe barbed wire fences. But for the Jewish people at that time when Jesus was speaking, they would have a circular enclosure made of stone and no actual gate, because I can picture a gate 2 or 3 at my house on my fences in and out, and decorative gates and really gates. We colored that pretty gate, but they didn't do a gate. In theory, that's what they're telling me. I find this so hard to imagine. This is my job. But when you put the sheep into this circular big pen where the doorway is, there's nothing, and the shepherd would literally lay down across that space.
Oh,
And well, kind of, but I don't know what he's laying in, but okay. I know it is a sweet offer. Like it's a practical kind of gross idea, but I'm not a shepherd. So maybe he was smelly. Maybe that's why they got the smelly connotation. But he would literally lay there protecting the sheep. And so there's a picture in here. I like to use napkins as ear markers. And I get, it's so crazy that y'all don't have books, because then I get more info than you. But pass that around. That's it's a big thing made of stone. And then she said they would even put brambles and barbed wire, or not barbed wire, but stuff that would be like a natural barbed wire, so that the wolves and the bad guys wouldn't jump in. So the sheep were very protected as long as the shepherd stayed in his laying at night, so they couldn't get out. And then one more thing, well, there's many things, but another thing that was kind of interesting is that instead of just being my flock in this pen, it would be maybe all of our flocks. And we had the one shepherd that kept all of ours because they weren't super big.
So maybe even the shepherds took turns.
Yes, yeah.
Being in the gate.
I'm Monday, Wednesday, and you're Tuesday, Thursday. And so all the sheep look amazingly alike because they're sheep and they look to me exactly alike. So how they know their shepherd is from his voice. And so that's an interesting, way sweeter than the dog nipping at it, so they
Until they weren't that dumb, if they could learn his voice, at least they knew that.
right. And I'm seeing if I have missed anything.
You know that song.
And so remember what we said about sheep. They are easily prone to wander. And so they had to stay in the enclosure, And so the shepherd kept him away from wolves, which is a classic, but the wolf in sheep's clothing. I want to find the page where it tells it, because to start out feeding the sheep as little babies, this is kind of jumping ahead, but I want y'all to see the way this goes. Excuse me. When you're on TV, this is what happens. In the morning, the shepherd would get up early in the sheepfold and feed the little lambs, the babies first. He might feed them out of a special food he had tucked in his pocket or little special things he collected, things that would be tender for their stomach. He picks up the lambs, he holds the lambs, he checks them to make sure they're okay, and he calls them by name. He knew them intimately. And so he took care of the baby lambs first. Then, after feeding the lambs, this is part 2, the shepherd carefully leads the sheep down to a place where they could be fed. He leads and he cares for them. Part 3, the last step, once he had fed the lambs, cared for the sheep, he led them to the good pasture so that they could kind of feed all day. This will come in a story later, but it's the idea of a very intimate, close relationship with the lambs, with the sheep. So then they get his voice that way.
This scripture in Psalm 22, verse 9. Yet you are he who brought me forth from the womb. You made me trust when upon my mother's breast. Upon you I was cast from birth. You have been my God from my mother's womb. And that's just so touching because God knew us when we were conceived and before we were even born. He knew us.
And intimately takes care of us, dumb. Yes.
You know, the story of the shepherd going out and saving the one out of the 100, you know, the flock these flocks, there may have not been 100 sheep in them.
Mhm.
And that's how the shepherd knew all their names and was more intimate with them because it wasn't necessarily a flock of 100. You know, it may have been a flock of 25. You know, we don't know.
Yeah, very, very much more intimate than I think of. Okay, let's look at, well, first let's think about it. So in the Bible, there are many, but what do y'all think of with shepherd, sheep, or the gate?
You know, we all know Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd.
Yes. And we may go through that in a little bit, but that's classic. I mean, you gotta know that one. Psalms 23, what else?
And along with that, David killed the lions and everything to protect his sheep even before Jesus.
Well, David is maybe our most famous shepherd. We're in a different study too, where we're studying David, and of course, when he was called by God, but Samuel came to anoint him, where was David?
He was tending the sheep.
Tending the sheep. So he was, and then many of the Psalms, you know, reference the sheep and the shepherd, and David knew that intimately. Who else was a shepherd that might come to mind?
Well, the shepherds who went to see Jesus when he was born.
Right, first persons that God told were here, were on the earth, were the shepherds. So they were not esteemed, like by their peers, maybe their peers, but not in society. They were looked down on. They were smelly because they were laying in the sheep pen.
No,
But,
why?
and didn't have lots of bathing setups, but they were esteemed by God.
And then when Joseph brought his family over, they stayed from Egypt or to Egypt. They stayed out in an area because they were shepherds. So it was kind of
Yeah,
their family
they were
background.
disgusting to the Egyptians.
Yeah.
But it gave them some really good land.
Yeah.
That was a good cover.
Land of Goshen.
Yeah. Who in Genesis 4 do you think of as a shepherd? Abel, yeah. Abel gets a lot of airtime in this because he's obviously killed by Cain, but he brought the fat parts of the sheep as his offering that were accepted. So see, fat is not all bad, girls. The fat parts are okay. And then even in Hebrews 11, the faith chapter, it kind of kicks off with, he's verse 4, but 11:4 of Hebrews mentions Abel again. So a famous shepherd who was killed by his brother. But
And then Esau, I guess you could say, he really He wasn't
Well, they
really
put the
the shepherd,
lambs-
but he
yeah,
was more the hunter than
Yeah.
the,
Jamie.
Mhm.
yeah.
Jamie, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So he was kind of the bad ones. Well, they were both not great, but,
Moses was a shepherd for his father.
Yes,
That's right, in Midian.
And that's when, you know, kind of it says he was in the palace, then he was the shepherd, then he was leading. And the time of shepherding in the wilderness brought out his qualities or gave him the qualities he needed to be the good leader. And of course, that's when he saw I am the burning bush, which is the beginning of our study here. Anything else?
but then in the New Testament, it's not brought out as much except for the parables, kind of.
Right, that's true.
Well, a shepherd was humble in a way because he was not in the elite, leader quality. And Joe Barnett says nothing makes a person as humble as grace, and at the same time, so confident. Grace makes us humble and yet confident that God is with us.
And then must have been kind and tender-hearted to
To interact.
And the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. That's 2 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 1:18. So the cross is folly. It doesn't mean anything to hardly anyone, and yet to those of us who are being saved, it's power,
Right.
and glory.
Amen. Well, let's look at the actual verses where they are in the Bible. So if you want to, it's John 10, and you know we're in John. So the first thing we talked about was I am the bread, and that was during which feast?
Passover.
Unleavened bread Passover. Well, I mean, they're really together, yeah. So, and then we moved ahead, and last week we talked about,
I am the light.
and it was I am the light was which one?
Festival of Lights.
And that is pretty
Well,
easy
actually,
to say.
Festival of Tabernacles
Oh,
or
yes.
booths, but yes, the light was a part of it. So when Jesus said all this, it was making a lot of sense to the people who were at that moment. And so that was just seconds away. And what happened right after Jesus said, I'm the light of the world last week, he heals the blind man. And then there's a whole lot of stuff about, spiritually blind and who healed you. And the man, I love this line. I don't know who healed me. I just know I was blind. And now I can see. I love that line. And so Jesus is talking to the Pharisees right in there. He's talking to the blind man at the end of number 9. And he says, this is the last verse in chapter 9. If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. And who is he actually talking to? Pharisees. So they're saying, we're better than you. We know everything. We're the teachers of the law. And he's like, since you say that, now you're more blind than the guy who was blind. And he goes straight into this. So it's still the Festival of Booths. It's still the same day, same minutes that he said, I am the light of the world. Now he says, I tell you the truth, the man who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. The man who enters by the gate is the shepherd of his sheep. The watchman opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus says again, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. So he kind of says it twice in those two verses. Whoever enters through me will be saved. That's our first promise. Second, he will come in and out, or he will come in and go out and find pasture. Second promise. And the last one, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And here's our promise. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. So that's the part of the gate. So thinking of everything we said, what does all that mean to you? Any thoughts?
I did a lot of thinking about gate because they made such a big thing about the Super Bowl and how much a ticket cost to see the Super Bowl. And then I have family that are flying and they had to get a ticket. And both of these places have a gate. And you have to prove, either with your phone or with your paper ticket, I belong here. You got to have proof that you are who you say you are.
That's true.
And the only way that we can have that proof is Jesus Christ. He is our ticket into heaven.
Yes.
Because without his blood, as you were saying a while ago, he is the only way. And I guess I had always, in the past, always concentrated on the shepherd part of it, not on the gate.
Right.
And it was like, oh, that's as important.
It really is. Yeah.
That's Hebrews 8:9 of Jesus saying how he, or, the proof that Jesus is our ticket. He is our high priest.
Right. And it really goes with next week. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. And the gate. I'm in the gate. Didn't you have some gate thoughts last week that I thought were good?
Well, it doesn't,
Some gate notes.
well, she said, what do you think of with gate? And, because we did have cows, and my thought was, I got in a lot of griping when I forgot to close the gate, because it is what keeps the cows in or out. It is, it's the thing that keeps things in or out. And, you don't ever want to be the one that is in charge of closing the gate. You don't want to be on the outside, because it is such an important thing. It is this thing that stops people or things or keeps people in or out. And I thought it's kind of a sign of where you belong, like when you drive down the highway to the big ranches and they have the big fancy gates that show this is where we belong, this is our inheritance. And that's kind of what I thought with the gate. And I did think when you were reading about the sheep know his voice, I can think of my husband, we didn't have sheep, we had cows. He would drive out and he did know them by sight. He did know them by name. And he would call them and he would hand feed them. And to me, they all looked exactly the same, but he could tell them apart. So.
I thought of something that I'd really never put it together until I was reading this. My husband and I, when we were first married, we went over to Jamaica, to Montego Bay, to an all-inclusive little resort that was gated. But one day we just were kind of bored and we thought, let's just go walk around. Let's go see what's going on outside that gate. And we did. And we got scared. We wandered too far and didn't know how to get back. We began to bicker. I wanted an immediate, I never want to see you again. Look what you've done to me. You've brought me out here. This whole thing. And he was feeling the same way. It was just, we were kind of fighting about it. We were young. We were scared. And we saw things we did not need to see. And then when we saw the gate to that little compound, you would not believe the relief, the safety we felt immediately. We got inside that gate and just were like, we will never, ever disobey again. But I've never really put that together until I was reading this and I thought,
yeah.
That happened 38 years ago. Why didn't I pay attention?
Well, I will say gates for me. I've never really thought about gates. And then y'all are bringing up such good points. It is such a division. Who's on one side, who's on the other.
Yes.
It is the dividing point, and it does equal safety and security in many, or not, whichever way you go with it.
Right.
If you're on the other end, it's not so good. And we have some friends that live in a gated community, and if they could have said that one more time in our conversation, I don't know how. It was just like, because it can, we don't want it, not with Jesus, but it can mean I'm all that and a bag of chips and you're not. Must be rough to live outside the gated community. But, in thoughts of Jesus and the world, it is rough. Or I imagine, I've always been a Christian my life, but how hard it is without Jesus, how hard life is on the other side of the gate.
You have to know the password. And I live in a gated community, and after 8 o'clock at night, you cannot get in unless you know the password and punch it in.
That's safe.
Yes, that's a good point.
It's sad that they've had to do this, but there's so many schools.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
that have
every
had to,
school. Yes.
fence everything
Gate
in.
Yeah.
And it's like, a Christian school. I was there for a long time, and people could just come in, and now, every door is locked, and you've got to either have the code or you ring the bell and somebody lets you in. But it's a safety thing. They have to have it. They have
But
to
there's
have
some lessons to be
it.
learned there.
We live in an evil world.
Yes.
The wolves are out there waiting to get us little sheep. And the shepherd and the gate are what keep us protected.
Safe. Yeah. Not that we're excluding people. Well, we're excluding the people who would come in and harm us. But
Well, Jesus
the
said
thieves and
almost
robbers,
as often as anything else, the thieves and the robbers, they only want to come in and destroy.
That's kind of, we have farms and the gate that goes to where the barn is, where the cows are, and it's locked. Unless it's somebody who belongs there
and they have the key.
and has the key.
Mhm.
The other day, we pulled up and there was a young man there, and I didn't know he was working, helping my son. But he didn't have the key. He was waiting for my son who has the key. And we said, well, we've got a key. We can let you, but he wasn't going to go any farther
Because
without somebody who has the key. Because of all the thieves and robbers that have broke into that barn.
Unless we think it's just our generation, Jesus knew this as well.
That's right. It's not a
It's
new
always
thing.
been.
And on a little, kind of with that, there's a ranch down in Central Texas I go to, and they now have locks, and so it's mechanical gates. But before that, I was the most spry, which tells you who I'm going with if I'm the most spry. But I was the gate open and closer, And so it was a lot of work. And by the time we got to the house, it was just like, oh, this is crazy. But it made me, putting in this context, thank you, Jesus, that He does the work. I don't have to save myself. I don't have to move the gate. He's the gate. He's moving things. And all I have to do is just come on in, and believe. And I love the way it is, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. Period. Done. We could drop the mic there. I like that he connects those two things in his discourse. And then, of course, I came that they might have life and have it abundantly is added right here. That was good. Any thoughts? More thoughts? Want to talk? Diane? Any gate stories?
No, I think I just went back to my concordance or what have you, I
Well, that's a good one.
looked down at all the different Isaiah had a lot of.
Well, and yes, there's so much today. I don't even know. And again, it's cohesive the way she does it. I don't know the way I do it, if it's going to be cohesive, because she went off on all these little tangents that all relate because there's so much in the Bible about it, but they're not all in a neat package. We got to go. And Isaiah's got some good stuff. Okay. Well, so with that being said, let's go then to part 2. I am the good shepherd, which he goes straight into with verse 11. chapter 10, 11, he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd who owns the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. Second time he says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father knows me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. And so then, of course, the Jews, at these words, the Jews again were divided. Many of them said, he is demon possessed and raving mad. Why listen to it? But others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? Because remember, he just healed the blind man. So this is still connected to, I am the light of the world. And, not that I want to, but I can kind of get why the Jewish leaders thought, because if someone walked into our church today and started spouting what seems crazy, you're kind of like, I've got it all worked out. You don't make sense to me. So I kind of feel sad for them. But then I don't want to, because they don't, they were staring at Jesus and still didn't get it. But so the idea of the shepherd, we kind of covered some of it, but do y'all have any?
Well, now when he says, I lay down my life, I can see also like laying down in the gate.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that makes a lot more sense now too.
Right. And how they would take it to the dead.
In Jeremiah 49, verse 19, who is like me, who can summon me into court, and who then is the shepherd who can stand against me? That was God talking to Jeremiah.
That's a good one. No one here. Okay, this picture is, I'm gonna send it around too, because I know it's little, but this is an actual sheep gate in Jerusalem. You know how Jerusalem's a walled city and they have all the different gates. So this is the sheep gate, and it's a physical gate built by Nehemiah in the time of Nehemiah. Probably not by Nehemiah, but it's also known as the Lion's Gate or Stephen's Gate. Nehemiah 3:1 is where it's told of. It's near the pool of Bethesda. It's close to the temple, and it was used specifically to bring the sheep in for the sacrifices. So again, the sacrifice, Jesus really says here, clearly enough that we get it, the Pharisees didn't, he's going to lay down his life for the sheep. And, greater love has no man than you lay down your life. So that one, beautiful.
Yeah, that's a really fancy gate.
This is the kind of stuff that makes me say, oh, I would like to go there someday and see.
Yes, and I was thinking that, and then they had the whole thing on October 7th, and I went, nope, no, you're not
And
going.
I'm so glad that he did have other sheep.
And bringing them in, yes. That's how we got here, I guess.
That's true.
Because I am definitely not Jewish.
Okay, so in John 10, he kind of covers three aspects of a good shepherd. Did y'all pick up on anything that a good shepherd would do?
He would lay down his life for his sheep.
Right, and that's kind of our big one, right?
He knows his sheep.
Yeah. And
The only way you can get in.
yeah, so he gives them eternal life. That's the way the book called it. And they do point out, and y'all know this, to know means you could know it like the fact, but to know it in your heart is different.
It says here that Jesus gives us access to the Father so that we can live in intimacy and relationship with Him. That relationship is what we need with the Father.
And that's the knowing the Father. And so not just knowing there is a God, knowing what the Bible might say factually, but knowing in your heart, not just your head. And yeah, that's what we need. And that's what,
Okay, so you think the hired hand is like false preachers or prophets because they come in, they gotta run away when there's anything. And they don't really care for the sheep or
right,
for the people.
right.
They're just like the hired hand, that means he was paid. So he was there for the money.
Right. And no real love.
Yeah.
And we all know somebody in our lives or somebody's, and I'm not talking preachers,
Yeah.
but people that you thought, oh, they're a Christian. And when they see a better opportunity,
Yeah. They're gone.
they're gone.
Mhm.
And it always turns out badly for them, but
Yeah. They got out of the game. They ran, or I don't know. Well, so just kind of thinking of betraying Jesus leads us to one of the big things about, and y'all know this chapter, when Peter denies Christ and then Jesus is killed, and he goes back to fishing. And so that's what he knew. That's what he was. He was a fisherman and he was out on the boat. Remember, the man yells, "Hey, have you caught any fish?" And he's like, "No." And he says, "Toss your net over here and you'll catch him." And of course, he hauls up, I think, 153, 158. He had a number. And then when he gets to the shore, he realizes that's Jesus. And that's when Jesus gives him the time to repent, more or less, by saying, and let me read it to you. It's John 21:15-17. When they had finished eating the fish they just caught, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you," he says. And Jesus says first, "Feed my lambs." Or in some verses do it different, but her verse did, "Feed my lambs," which, remember when I told you a minute ago, he feeds the little lambs first. Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Well, yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep," which is second when he took the sheep out and took them to the pasture. The third time he says, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, this is making me cry, "Feed my sheep." And so that's when he is going to care for the sheep. But, and I've always heard, Peter denied 3 times and he got 3 times to say, "I love you. Yes, Lord, I love you." Kind of making up and repenting of that. But this she brought out, and I thought this was good. The sheep were 153 sheep, so they counted them.
Fish.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank God. Who knows what I'm saying? Yes, fish, 153. And she says, the author, "I love this strange detail tucked in the holy words of God, because fishermen would have known exactly how many fish they would have kept. Fishermen quickly judged and counted the fish they caught. They threw out the small fish because they'd have to pay more in tax than the fish was actually worth. They would look at the fish and say, this one's in, this one's out, this one's in, this one's out. A fisherman would never pick up the fish, love the fish, make sure the fish is okay, or name the fish." So Peter had to be changed from a quick judging fisherman into a caring shepherd, a shepherd of God's people. And I never thought of that. Like, the qualities we've said for shepherds are definitely not the qualities a fisherman needs. And I just never got really how caring shepherds were, because we have cattle. I don't have anything. I don't even have a dog. So I just thought that was a beautiful thought.
And I love the fact that he knows our name.
Yes. And
of
names.
all the millions and millions of people,
I mean,
even the believers,
yes.
yet he knows each one of us.
I'm doing good to get these
And
at
how
the
many hair
table.
we have on our head.
Yes, yes, unbelievable.
Well, that's a really good point. That story makes so much more sense.
He's not only giving him a chance to repent, but bringing him to the shepherding. And so I never know how much time we've got, but so let's go to Psalm 23. And y'all really probably could say it without going there, but
I used to.
yes. I won't put us on blast. We'll try it. But the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. Now stop for 1 second because she is in the video. I don't know if you're watching
No,
it.
I'm not.
She's, it's really good. It really is. And it's not, I always hate when they go like 3 hours and you're like, no. So it's 20 minutes or
Yeah.
something like that. But she is actually standing in,
I remember you said that.
Yeah.
The actual
the Holy
places,
Land.
yeah.
And so this one picture, and I know phones go off and whatever, but I always picture it being like green line. She said, don't you just think it's like the Swiss Alps? And I'm like, yes, I do. They're running on the Sound of Music and, it's green all. It looks more like a barren wasteland. It looks like that wall, like
I was
Roswell.
just gonna say El Paso, because
Yes.
I worked there.
Wow.
Utterly barren. And so,
Oh,
but
wow.
very pointed up hills.
And for them to think of green pastures.
So if it does rain, it may not, but if it ever does, the water is rushing, and making these little gorges.
Yes.
And so making little
Yes.
valleys.
Mhm.
And so she had some points about that. And then the phone never wants to do it, I want it to. There's these deep ruts, and pass that one around. And so I have to think, you've had a path where the ruts get deep.
Yeah.
So our ruts with God need to be deep. That was one of her thoughts.
Mhm.
But instead of the shepherd and the sheep going like straight down this slippy slope, hard to maneuver,
Mhm.
you walk curvy up, maybe rounding up. And that's the path of righteousness. So, I always read it and thought, yeah, path of righteousness means I'm on a good, righteous living. But and those are not it, those are just the ruts. But she said, so instead of doing that, which you're gonna fall, the sheep's gonna fall, I've been at Buffalo Lakes where you just slide down and then you're on your bottom, you're sliding down, and that wasn't fun. So you need the path that will lead you up safely and down safely. So, he leads me, this is verse 3, he guides me in paths of righteousness. She equated that to the right path up the hill and down. And again, y'all saw how brown it is. When you get to the quiet, still waters and the green grass, that's going to be in the valley. And so he's taking them from up here where the pin is safely down the mountain to the calmer. And that was just a different version in my head than I'd ever had. And then she says, he restores my soul, which we kind of skipped over that. I'm not saying in new order, let's say. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. So what do you know about shadows? What do you need to make a shadow?
Sunlight.
Light. So last week we talked about light and how you can't really ever douse light, even a match in Carlsbad Caverns is light. But to be in the shadow, thank you, you need light somewhere. So you may be in the dark side of the shadow, but her point is the light is still with you. Can shadows hurt you? No, because it's nothing. Like, the real thing might hurt you, but not the shadow of it. And so I thought that was a neat verse, just a visual, that there is light in every shadow of death. And that can't hurt me. Now, death really can't hurt us as Christians. It feels like it, but so it's not as bad as you think, as long as the light is with you. She said it very much nicer than I did, but I thought, ooh, I never really thought about shadows or light and like that. So that was kind of comforting. And she said, and again, she says it really well, but between my unfulfilled expectation and my current reality, which think of those as mountains, there's some fertile ground. And what usually grows there? Disappointment. Because you wanted this, but you got this, and like, ugh. And she says, the tall mountains aren't where the growth happens, though. The deep valley is where the shepherd had to bring them for the grass and the water. And so there's the whole idea of us being in the valley. We're still with the shepherd. That's where our nourishment is. The mountaintops might be fun and awesome, but the valley is where the growth comes and the nourishment comes. And I don't really want to hear that because I don't want to be in the valley. But I thought, ooh, yeah, that's kind of true, right?
But you're right in your staff.
Yes. And that God restores our soul. He doesn't take the problems away, but he will restore you and be comforted with your rod and your staff. And as someone who lost a husband, and like, let's have a show of hands for this group, we've all almost, or lost anybody. You feel, I mean, he didn't bring back the husband, but he certainly did restore and comfort and guide, fed, nourished every step of the way. And so that just really kind of hit me. And then one thing I just thought was kind of interesting, I always think of the staff where it's grabbing the sheep out of a bush or something with the curve. And also it was used for the water because the water does rush down. It might be 2 foot, it might be 30 foot. So the shepherd would use the staff to measure depth of the water, but also of the mud. And so the sheep at all times were not going to drown or get stuck in the mud with the staff. The shepherd used it for that, as well as protection against the wolves. I mean, there is a lot more, but I guess we might have to quit. I will say, if y'all wanted to, Ezekiel 34, and I will be the first to say I don't go to Ezekiel for much. It's probably got good stuff, but Ezekiel 34, the whole chapter is
Really good.
it's really good, and about how bad shepherds first good. Yes.
I was gonna say, before we end, I want to play a song.
Oh, okay.
You may know this, I'm a sheep.
No.
Sheep, you and the shepherd.
I'm a sheep.
When you hear it, you'll
Well, okay, you said it's not play it.
just sing it.
No, okay, but it doesn't look like it's gonna play, but the words are, I'm a sheep and the Lord is my shepherd, watching over my soul to keep, guarding me, ever watching wherever I go. And the chorus is, and when the winds blow, he is my shelter. When I'm lost and alone, he rescues me. When the lion comes, he is my victory, constantly watching over me. He is constantly watching over me. In the next verse, we are his children and he is our father, watching over our souls. Great is his love for his sons and his daughters, watching wherever we go. And when the winds blow, he is my shelter. When I'm lost and alone, he rescues me. When the lion comes, he is my victory, constantly watching over me. He is constantly watching over me.
That's beautiful. And one little point about the sheep that wanders off, and y'all, there's something for us to learn here. When you have the hardest time is when you're alone and confused and you feel helpless.
That's the part of the little book that really spoke to me.
Yes.
Because it's very tempting to just be alone and then you start being deceived and you don't really realize it.
Yeah.
And then you realize I've got to get back around my people who encourage me and everything else. You
And
know,
speak words,
and
yeah.
speak the words of Jesus to me. And it's hard to do. And it really related to the 2020 thing. People
Oh,
who have not
absolutely.
come back to church, people have used that excuse and
Still aren't here.
still aren't, and still say, oh, I watched it on TV. Well, I'm sorry, but
That's
I
not
need
the
you
same.
here. I need to see you encouraging face, and I need to be here for you to give you encouragement. You know, that's just so powerful to me. I don't know if it is to everybody.
No, it is to me too. And you need your flock.
Sometimes, I mean, like, I just need to be at church, not even really, I'm not focused on hearing the sermon. I just need to see my,
You need to be with the people.
yeah.
Amen.
It's just,
Yeah. Okay, this was awesome.